Welcome to Pastor's Chat today. We're in Revelation chapter 21 and we're talking about a new heaven and a new earth. Yesterday we talked about how we step from time which is a past, a present, and a future, time and space three-dimensional, where you can measure distance from time and distance and space into eternity. Beyond our imagination what eternity will be like when time will be no more. We talked about that yesterday. Here in Revelation 21, after the great white throne judgment, after the millennial literal thousand-year reign of Christ on earth with his saints, then eternity begins. And now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no more sea. How interesting, and we mentioned this yesterday in our blog, that the Bible starts with the first book called Genesis, the book of beginnings, and finishes in the last book, the 66th book of the Bible, called Revelation. The entire Bible is a revelation of God. And here in this book, Revelation, we have an unveiling of what will happen in the future. And it ends with telling us about eternity in these last two chapters, chapters 21 and 22. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. Isn't it interesting that human history began in a garden and ends in a city that is like a garden paradise? In the Apostle John's day, who is of course writing this book, Rome was the admired city of the world, yet God compared it to a harlot. And he said, remember in Luke 16:15, that which is highly esteemed among men is an abomination in the sight of God. But God's eternal city is compared to a beautiful bride here in chapter 21 verse 9, because it is the eternal home for God's beloved people. As you look at this chapter 21 and 22, you can see the contrast as you see the book of Genesis tells us what begins is brought to completion here in Revelations 21 and 22. And just to summarize it, in Genesis 1:1, the heavens and the earth were created. In Revelation 21:1, there is a new heaven and a new earth. In Genesis, the sun was created in verse 16, chapter 1. In Revelation, there's no need for the sun, chapter 21, verse 23. The night is established in Genesis 1, verse 5. But in Revelation 22:5, no night will be there. The seas were created in chapter 1, verse 10. In 21:1, there is no more sea. The curse was announced in Genesis 3:14 through 17. But in chapter 22:3 of Revelation, no more curse. Death enters history, chapter 3, verse 19 of Genesis. But in Revelation 21:4, no more death. Man is driven from the tree and is not able to eat of the tree of life there in the midst of paradise, chapter 3:24. But man is restored to paradise and invited to eat of the tree that grows on both sides of the river of God that comes from beneath his throne, we will see in chapter 22:14. Sorrow and pain begin, chapter 3, verse 17, we read about in Genesis. But there will be no more tears or no more pain in the new creation, chapter 21, verse 4 of Revelation. And so what a day that will be. And we read even that Isaiah had prophesied in chapter 65, verse 17, behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. Behold, and be glad and rejoice in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem as a rejoicing and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people. The voice of weeping shall no longer be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. Even Isaiah saw it 600 years before Christ was even born and prophesied of a new heaven and a new earth. Oh, my friend, that day is coming, and I'm looking forward to it, and I trust you are too. God bless, and you have a wonderful, wonderful day.